In 1933, Albert Einstein took the stage at Oxford University to deliver a lecture that would change everything. What he said that night has never been taught in schools. Before hundreds of academics, Einstein made a confession that should have shattered the very bedrock of modern science. He said, and I'm quoting him directly, that pure thought can grasp reality, just as the ancients dreamed. You heard that right. The man who revolutionized physics, the genius behind the theory of relativity, the most famous scientist of the 20th century. He said that the ancients, people who lived thousands of years before us, already understood how reality works, and nobody talks about it. Why? Because Einstein's confession contradicts everything the modern education system wants you to believe. The official narrative is simple. We are more advanced than any previous civilization. The Greeks were primitive philosophers. The Egyptians were superstitious. The ancients didn't understand anything of real substance. But Einstein disagreed, and he had proof. In 1947, in an interview with the New Yorker magazine, Einstein said something even more revealing. He asked, "How can a truly educated person stay away from the Greeks?" Think about that. The greatest scientist in modern history. The man who rewrote the laws of the universe. He's saying that anyone who's truly educated needs to study the ancient Greeks, not modern physicists, not scientists in cutting-edge labs. The Greeks, people who lived 2,500 years ago. And you need to understand why. Einstein spent his entire life chasing a single question. A question he confessed numerous times kept him awake at night. The question was this: how can it be that mathematics, being after all a product of human thought that is independent of experience, is so admirably appropriate to the objects of reality? Let that sink in for a moment. Einstein couldn't understand why mathematics worked. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Math just works. 2 plus 2 is always 4. The circumference divided by the diameter always equals pi. Equations predict the behavior of particles we've never even seen. But Einstein saw it as a profound mystery. Why do abstract numbers, which exist only in our minds, perfectly describe the behavior of the physical universe? Why can equations written on paper predict the movement of planets, the behavior of atoms, the curvature of space-time? Modern science has no answer for this, but the ancients did. Pythagoras, 2,500 years before Einstein, declared that all is number. He wasn't making a poetic statement. He was making a statement about the fundamental structure of reality. For Pythagoras, numbers weren't just tools for counting. They were the very substance of the cosmos: musical harmony, planetary movements, the proportions of the human body. Everything followed mathematical patterns. Because mathematics was the language in which the universe was written, and Einstein discovered that Pythagoras was right. Alfred North Whitehead, one of the most respected philosophers of the 20th century and collaborator of Bertrand Russell, publicly declared that Einstein and other modern scientists are following the pure Pythagorean tradition. Read that again. Einstein is following the tradition of Pythagoras, not the other way around. The narrative you've been taught says that science evolves, that each generation knows more than the last, that we are at the pinnacle of human knowledge. But Whitehead, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, said that Plato and Pythagoras are closer to modern physics than Aristotle. Why does this matter? Because Aristotle is the philosopher that the medieval academy adopted. Aristotle is the basis of conventional scientific thought. Aristotle is the guy that universities celebrate. But Whitehead is saying that the Pythagoreans and Platonists, the mystical philosophers that academia considers less scientific, were closer to the truth. And Einstein agreed. In his own words, Einstein said that the scientist is a Platonist or a Pythagorean insofar as he considers the point of view of logical simplicity as an indispensable and effective tool of his research. Einstein wasn't just quoting the ancients out of respect. He was saying that their philosophy was the foundation of his scientific method. This is huge, and almost no one knows it. In 1921, Einstein gave a lecture at the Prussian Academy of Sciences entitled Geometry and Experience. In that lecture, he made a statement that should be in every physics textbook. He said that geometria, completed, is evidently a natural science. We may in fact regard it as the oldest branch of physics. The oldest branch of physics, not biology, not chemistry, geometry. The science that the Greeks mastered 2,500 years ago. Einstein was saying that the first true physicists weren't Galileo or Newton. They were the Greek geometers. They were Euclid, Pythagoras, Plato. And here's the part they really don't want you to know. Einstein said that without this vision of geometry, he could not have formulated the theory of relativity. Do you understand what that means? The theory that revolutionized physics. The theory that gave us the atomic bomb, nuclear power, GPS, black holes. That theory was only possible because Einstein understood geometry in the same way as the ancient Greeks. Without Pythagoras, there would be no Einstein. Without Plato, there would be no relativity. Modern science hasn't surpassed the ancients. It's finally caught up to what they already knew. But there's something even deeper here. Einstein wasn't just interested in the methods of the ancients. He was interested in their conclusions. The Pythagoreans believed that the universe was fundamentally harmonious, that there were sacred proportions that governed everything, from music to the movements of the planets. They called this the harmony of the spheres. Modern science ridicules this idea as superstitious. But in 2015, scientists detected gravitational waves for the first time. What are gravitational waves? They're vibrations in space-time itself, the fabric of the universe literally oscillating. That's exactly what the Pythagoreans predicted. They said that the cosmos vibrates in harmonious patterns. They had no way to prove it, but their intuition was correct. Einstein knew this. He wrote about the pre-established harmony that allows the productive union between the spiritual and material realms. He was using Pythagorean language to describe physics. This isn't coincidence. Einstein studied the ancients obsessively. In 1933, Albert Einstein, a name synonymous with genius, stood on the hallowed stage of Oxford University, ready to deliver a lecture that would challenge everything we thought we knew about reality. He kept a portrait of Schopenhauer, a philosopher deeply influenced by Eastern wisdom, in his Berlin office. He engaged in dialogues with Rabindranath Tagore, exploring the very nature of reality, and he often quoted Spinoza, whose philosophy was rooted in ancient Hermetic texts. Einstein wasn't just doing physics. He was rediscovering a wisdom that had been lost, or perhaps deliberately hidden. And here's the question you should be asking. If Einstein, arguably the greatest scientist in modern history, believed that the ancients possessed fundamental knowledge about reality, why isn't this taught in schools? Why do physics curricula begin with Galileo and Newton, and not with Pythagoras and Plato? Why is Greek philosophy treated as mere history, and not as science? The answer is deeply unsettling. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church adopted Aristotle as its official philosopher. Aristotelian physics, which claimed that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones, became dogma. The Aristotelian cosmology, with Earth at the center of the universe, became sacred truth. But Pythagoras and Plato taught something entirely different. They taught that physical reality was merely a shadow of perfect mathematical forms, that the material world was a projection of abstract patterns. This idea was dangerous. If physical reality is just a shadow, then the Church cannot control the truth. If mathematics is more fundamental than matter, then priests are not the sole guardians of knowledge. If the ancients already knew how the universe works, then the entire narrative of progress crumbles. So, the Pythagoreans were marginalized. The Platonists were labeled as mystics, and the philosophy that truly explained reality was buried beneath centuries of Aristotelian dogma. Einstein knew this. In his letters, he expressed frustration with how the history of science was being told. He knew that the official narrative concealed more than it revealed. And here's something that almost no one mentions. Einstein did not believe that the universe was purely material. In 1929, in an interview with the poet George Sylvester Virek, Einstein was asked if he believed in God. His response was carefully formulated. He said that he believed in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the ordered harmony of what exists. Spinoza's God is not a personal being. It is the very mathematical structure of the universe. It's the rational order that permeates all of reality. This is pure Pythagoreanism. Pythagoras taught that the cosmos was governed by a divine order, expressed in mathematical proportions. Einstein was saying the same thing 2,500 years later. But the modern educational system presents Einstein as a materialist, as someone who viewed the universe as a purposeless machine, as a scientist who rejected any form of spirituality. This is a lie. Einstein explicitly rejected pure materialism. In his own words, he said that the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science. The mysterious, not the mechanical, not the predictable, the mysterious. Einstein viewed the universe with reverence. He felt that there was something profound and inexplicable in the mathematical order of reality. And he found this same reverence in the writings of the ancients. Plato, in the Republic, describes a world of perfect forms that exists beyond physical reality. These forms are the ideal models from which all material things are imperfect copies. For centuries, this was treated as speculative metaphysics, abstract philosophy with no scientific relevance. But quantum physics changed everything. At the subatomic level, particles have no definite position until they are observed. They exist as waves of probability, mathematical patterns that describe possibilities. Only when a measurement is made does the particle collapse into a specific location. This is exactly what Plato described. The mathematical forms are more fundamental than physical matter. Material reality is a manifestation of abstract patterns. The world we see is a shadow of the mathematical world that exists behind it. Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum mechanics and a Nobel Prize winner, said this explicitly. He wrote that the smallest units of matter are not physical objects in the ordinary sense. They are forms, structures, or ideas in the sense of Plato. Read that again. The smallest units of matter are ideas in the sense of Plato. One of the greatest physicists of the 20th century is saying that Plato understood the nature of matter better than the materialistic science of the last 300 years. And Einstein agreed. In a letter to Michel Besseau, his longtime friend, Einstein wrote about how mathematics seems to have an existence of its own, independent of the physical world. He marveled at the fact that mathematical structures discovered by pure thought frequently appeared in nature. The Pythagoreans would have understood perfectly. They taught that numbers were not human inventions. They were discoveries. Numbers existed before us. Mathematics is the eternal language of the cosmos, and we only partially unravel it. Einstein spent his entire life doing exactly that, unraveling the mathematical language of the universe, and with each discovery, he moved closer to the Pythagorean vision. In 1936, Einstein published an essay called Physics and Reality. In this essay, he made a statement that should have revolutionized the philosophy of science. He wrote that the eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. The fact that it is comprehensible is a miracle. A miracle. Einstein used that word deliberately. Why does the universe obey mathematical laws? Why can we describe the behavior of distant galaxies with equations written on paper? Why does human logic correspond to the structure of reality? Materialistic science has no answer, but the Pythagoreans did. They said that the human mind is part of the cosmic logos, that our ability to reason mathematically reflects the rational nature of the universe, that we are made of the same logical substance that governs the stars. Einstein was rediscovering this ancient truth. And here's the point that they really don't want you to grasp. If Einstein was right, then the entire narrative of scientific progress is an illusion. We are not advancing toward the truth. We are returning to a truth that was already known. The ancients were not primitives trying to understand a confusing universe. They had access to a form of knowledge that we have lost. Nay, a form of knowledge based on pure contemplation, on mathematical intuition, on the direct perception of cosmic order. Einstein recovered fragments of this ancient knowledge, his theory of relativity, an echo of Pythagorean thought, his vision of space-time as a geometry, an update to the sacred geometry of the ancients. But modern science, it refuses to acknowledge this. Why? Because admitting the ancients were right would mean admitting that modern science has been wrong for centuries. It would mean recognizing that materialism was a detour, not an advance. It would mean accepting there's more to the universe than just matter and energy. And that is unacceptable to the scientific establishment. They've built entire careers on the premise that progress is linear, that each generation knows more than the last, that the ancients were ignorant, and we are enlightened. Einstein, he shattered that premise, and that's why his statements about the ancients are ignored. Why his quotes about Pythagoras and Plato don't appear in textbooks. Why the connection between relativity and Greek geometry is systematically concealed. Are you starting to see the pattern? The truth about Einstein contradicts the official narrative. So the truth is suppressed. The inconvenient quotes are ignored. The history is rewritten to fit the dominant ideology. But Einstein's words remain. They're in his published essays, in his letters, in transcripts of his lectures. Anyone can check. And when you check, you discover something disturbing. Einstein was not who they told you he was. He wasn't a materialist. He didn't believe science had surpassed philosophy. He didn't see the ancients as primitive. Einstein was as much a philosopher as he was a physicist. He saw science as a form of contemplation. He sought not just to describe the universe, but to understand it on a deep level. And his greatest discovery wasn't E equals mc squared. His greatest discovery was that the ancients were right. Reality is mathematics. The universe is ordered by rational principles. The human mind can access eternal truths through pure thought. Pythagoras said this 2,500 years ago. Einstein proved it in 1915 with the theory of general relativity. And here we are, more than a century later, still pretending it didn't happen. But you now know the truth. You know that Einstein revered the ancients. You know that he saw his own work as a continuation of the Pythagorean tradition. You know that modern science is built on foundations that date back to ancient Greece. And you know why this is hidden. Because if everyone knew, the system would lose control of the narrative. If everyone realized that ancient wisdom was superior in many respects, we'd start questioning other things too. What else did the ancients know that we've forgotten? What other secrets are buried beneath centuries of materialistic propaganda? Einstein opened a door. He showed that it's possible to look beyond official science and find deeper truths. Truths that were already known by civilizations we call primitive. The question is, are you going to walk through that door? Are you going to investigate for yourself? Or are you going to continue believing the authorized version of history? Einstein made his choice. He studied the ancients. He recognized their wisdom. He built his physics on the foundations they established. And because of that choice, he changed the world. Now, the choice is yours. There's one last thing you need to know. Einstein wasn't alone in his conclusions. Niels Bohr, another giant of modern physics, and one of the founders of quantum mechanics, also looked to the ancients for answers. When he received the Order of the Elephant from Denmark in 1947, he chose the yin and yang symbol for his coat of arms. Think about that. One of the greatest physicists in the world chose an age-old Taoist symbol to represent his scientific work. Why? Because Bohr realized that the principle of complementarity, which he discovered in quantum physics, had already been intuited by the ancient Chinese. The yin and yang represents the unity of opposites, wave and particle, observer and observed, subject and object. Bohr wrote that we must turn to problems of knowledge that have already been considered by thinkers like Buddha and Lao Tzu. Buddha and Lao Tzu, not Descartes, not Bacon, not the philosophers of modern science, the Eastern sages who lived millennia before quantum physics. And it doesn't stop there. Erwin Schrödinger, who formulated the fundamental equation of quantum mechanics, was a dedicated scholar of the Upanishads, Indian sacred texts that are over 3,000 years old. In his book, My View of the World, Schrödinger declared that the Vedanta philosophy of ancient India was the only metaphysics compatible with modern physics. Three of the greatest physicists in history, Einstein, Bohr, and Schrödinger, all of them looked to the ancients. All of them found answers that modern science couldn't provide. Is that a coincidence? Or is there something these geniuses understood that the rest of us haven't realized yet? The truth is, the quantum revolution wasn't just a scientific revolution, it was a rediscovery. The physicists of the 20th century, exploring the deepest levels of reality, found principles that were already known by ancient civilizations. The interconnectedness of all things, the illusory nature of solid matter, the role of consciousness in creating reality. The Indian Vedas taught this. The Chinese Taoists taught this. The Greek Pythagoreans taught this. And now, quantum physics is confirming it. But the educational system continues to teach a truncated version of history, a version that starts with Galileo and ignores thousands of years of prior wisdom, a version that presents science as a rupture with the past, when in reality, it's a return to it. Einstein knew this, and he tried to tell us. In 1950, just a few years before his death, Einstein wrote a letter to the philosopher Erik Gutkind. In that letter, he said that the word God is for him nothing more than the expression and product of human weaknesses, the Bible, a collection of honorable but still primitive legends. Many use this letter to prove that Einstein was an atheist. But they ignore the context. In the same letter, Einstein praises Spinoza extensively. He says that Spinoza's philosophy is far superior to the concept of a personal God. He's rejecting not spirituality, but a specific form of religiosity. Spinoza, the philosopher Einstein admired most, believed that God and nature were the same thing, that the entire universe was an expression of a single divine substance, that everything was interconnected in a cosmic unity. That's pure mysticism, and that was Einstein's belief. He didn't subscribe to the idea of a personal God, one who answers prayers, but he absolutely believed in an intelligible cosmic order, a mathematical harmony that flows through everything, a universal rationality that the human mind can actually tap into. The Pythagoreans, they called it logos. The Stoics, they called it universal reason. Spinoza, he called it Deus sive natura, God, or nature. Einstein, well, he called it the mysterious. Different names for the same fundamental intuition, an intuition that the ancients first articulated and that modern science is slowly, almost hesitantly, rediscovering. And here is the ultimate irony. Modern science was built on the rejection of ancient authority. Galileo defied Aristotle. Newton challenged scholastic physics. The Enlightenment, it rejected tradition in favor of reason, but in the end, reason itself led the greatest scientists right back to the ancients. Einstein, by following pure logic to its deepest conclusions, arrived right where Pythagoras already was, Bohr, exploring the quantum mysteries. He found the yin and yang of the Taoists. Schrödinger, seeking meaning in his equations, he turned to the Upanishads. Science didn't overcome ancient wisdom. It completed a full circle and returned to it. It came home, and that's what they don't want you to know. Because if you knew, you'd start asking dangerous questions. You'd ask why ancient philosophy isn't taught alongside physics. You'd ask why Einstein revered the Greeks, but schools treat them as mere historical curiosities. You'd ask why the founders of quantum mechanics studied sacred Eastern texts, but physics textbooks never mention it. You'd begin to realize that there's a hidden knowledge, not hidden by deliberate conspiracy, necessarily, but hidden by institutional neglect, hidden by academic biases, hidden by the arrogance of a civilization that thinks it's superior to all those that came before it. Einstein, he saw right through that arrogance. He knew that the ancients understood things that we've forgotten. He knew that modern science was just a fragmentary rediscovery of the eternal truths. He knew that the key to the universe wasn't in laboratories, but in ancient texts and in pure contemplation. And he left a trail for us to follow. His quotes are out there. His letters have been published. His essays are available. The evidence is everywhere. For anyone who's willing to look. Einstein. He spent his entire life following the tradition of the ancients, and that tradition led him to the greatest discoveries in modern physics. Maybe, just maybe, it's time we did the same. Maybe it's time we looked at the ancients, not as primitives but as masters, not as superstitious but as wise, not as pre-scientific but as the first true scientists. Einstein tried to show us the way. The question is, are we ready to follow it? The ancients said that real knowledge cannot be taught. It must be discovered by each person, individually, through contemplation, through questioning, through a sincere search for the truth. Einstein was a seeker. He never accepted easy answers. He questioned everything, including the very foundations of the physics that he himself helped create. And that spirit of questioning led him to the ancients. Do you have that same spirit? Are you willing to question what you've been taught? Are you willing to discover for yourself? If the ancients really knew something that has been lost, Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge, because knowledge is limited to what we already know, but imagination can take us anywhere. Imagine a world where ancient wisdom was taught in schools, where Pythagoras was studied alongside Newton, where sacred geometry was part of the physics curriculum, where Einstein was presented as he really was, a philosopher-scientist who revered the ancients. That world is possible. But it starts with you. It starts with your willingness to look beyond the official narrative, to investigate on your own, to discover what Einstein discovered, that the ancients knew more than we've been led to believe. The truth is waiting. It always has been. Now, you know where to look.